Imagine this, a packed courtroom, the air so tense you could cut it with a knife. A 10-year-old boy, small for his age, stands up, his voice trembling but resolute. "You're my mom," he declares, and just like that, the room freezes. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Even the judge, known for her unshakable poise, falters. Who is this boy? Could his words possibly be true? What follows is a heart-wrenching journey of revelations, buried secrets, and an emotional reunion that will leave you speechless. Stay with us as we unravel this extraordinary story, one that might just change how you see love, family, and second chances forever. The courtroom buzzed with the kind of tension that makes even the air feel heavy. Judge Evelyn Harper, a figure of unshakable authority, sat poised at her bench, her gavel resting like a silent sentinel of justice. Across the room, Elijah Daniels, a small 10-year-old with eyes far too wise for his years, swung his legs nervously from his chair. The attorneys were locked in their usual verbal sparring, tossing around words like stability and best interests, but Elijah wasn't listening. Then, like a sudden crack of thunder on a quiet night, he stood and declared, "You're my mom." His words sliced through the courtroom's hum like a blade, leaving everyone frozen in disbelief. It was the kind of moment that feels too surreal to be real, like life itself had paused to gasp. Judge Harper's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. For decades, she had been the embodiment of composure, a woman who carried the weight of others' lives without flinching. But Elijah's words hit her like an earthquake, shaking loose memories she had buried so deeply they felt like they belonged to someone else. She stared at him, her mind racing through a maze of questions. Was this some cruel trick? A desperate plea for attention? Or could there be something more, something terrifyingly true hidden in those trembling words? Her voice wavered as she tried to regain control, but her usual clarity was nowhere to be found. It was as if the past had reached out with ghostly hands to tug her back into its grip. And yet, there was something about Elijah, his determination, his unyielding gaze that made it impossible for anyone to dismiss him outright. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, doesn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, something or someone comes along and flips the script. Elijah's boldness was a reminder that sometimes the truth refuses to stay buried. And as Judge Harper banged her gavel to restore order, one thing became clear. This wasn't just another case. It was personal. And when life gets personal, it has a way of demanding answers you're not sure you're ready to give. Judge Evelyn Harper sat at her bench, but her mind was far from the courtroom. Elijah's words had struck a chord so deep it reverberated through the carefully built walls of her life. She had always prided herself on her unshakable focus, yet here she was, her thoughts spiraling into memories she had long suppressed. Life has a funny way of catching up with you, doesn't it? You think you've outrun the past, only to find it waiting for you around an unexpected corner. And now, staring at Elijah's familiar eyes, she couldn't help but wonder, was this fate's way of forcing her to confront what she'd buried? Her thoughts drifted back to a younger version of herself, a scared college student, making a decision that would alter the course of her life. She remembered the sleepless nights, the whispered judgments from those around her, and the overwhelming sense of failure that had led her to give up her child. It wasn't a choice made lightly. It was one born from love and desperation, a hope that he would have a better life than she could provide. But now, seeing Elijah in front of her, that hope felt like a cruel irony. Could it be possible that life had brought him back to her? Or was this just another twist in its relentless unpredictability? As the hearing dragged on, Evelyn found herself stealing glances at Elijah, each one chipping away at her composure. His determination reminded her of herself, stubborn and unyielding in the face of adversity. Isn't it strange how life reflects us in others? Sometimes we see our past mistakes or our hidden strengths mirrored in someone else's eyes. And yet, even as she wrestled with these emotions, one thought kept surfacing. If Elijah truly was her son, what did that mean for everything she had built? Her career, her reputation, were they worth more than the truth? These questions loomed over her like storm clouds as she tried to focus on the case at hand. But deep down, she knew this was no ordinary case. This was destiny knocking on her door. Elijah Daniels had always been a seeker, a boy with questions too big for his small frame. Life in foster care had taught him resilience, but it also left him with a gnawing emptiness, a longing for answers about where he came from and why he was left behind. You see, when you grow up without roots, every whisper of connection feels like a lifeline. 6 months ago, he overheard a conversation that changed everything. The name Evelyn Harper. It stuck in his mind like a melody he couldn't forget. What if she was the missing piece? What if she was his? And so began his quiet quest, piecing together fragments of conversations and documents he wasn't supposed to see. It wasn't just curiosity, it was survival. Elijah's determination was nothing short of remarkable for someone his age. He didn't have much, a few crumpled papers, a name, and a gut feeling, but he clung to them like treasures. Isn't it funny how sometimes the smallest clues can lead us to the biggest truths? He studied Judge Harper from afar during the hearing, searching her face for something familiar. And when their eyes met, it was like looking at an old photograph you'd forgotten existed. That moment gave him the courage to speak up in court, even though fear gripped him tightly. Sometimes bravery isn't loud. It's the quiet voice that says, "I'll try anyway." Sitting in the courtroom after his bold declaration, Elijah felt both terrified and relieved. Had he made a mistake? Would she believe him? But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a wild guess or a desperate plea for attention. It was something deeper, something unshakable. Life has a way of guiding us toward the truths we need most, even if the journey is messy and uncertain. Elijah's courage reminds us that seeking answers is never easy, but it's always worth it. And as he waited for Judge Harper's response, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about finding her. It was about finding himself. The courtroom was silent, yet the air buzzed with an unspoken tension as Judge Evelyn Harper sat at her desk, poring over the sealed adoption records late into the night. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the yellowed pages, each word pulling her closer to a truth she had long buried. And there it was, her name etched in ink as the biological mother of Elijah Daniels. It felt like the world had tilted on its axis. Isn't it strange how a single moment can unravel years of carefully constructed reality? She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing with memories of a younger version of herself, a scared girl who had made an impossible choice. But now, staring at the undeniable truth, she knew there was no running from it anymore. The next morning, Evelyn walked into the courtroom with a resolve that seemed to radiate from her very being. She cleared her throat, her voice steady but tinged with emotion, as she addressed the room. "Before we proceed," she began, "there's something I need to say." All eyes turned to her as she looked directly at Elijah, his small frame tense with anticipation. "Elijah," she said softly, "what you said yesterday, I've looked into it." The boy sat up straighter, his wide eyes locked on hers. "It's true," she continued, her voice breaking ever so slightly. Gasps rippled through the room as Elijah's face crumpled with emotion. Sometimes life doesn't give us perfect moments, it gives us raw ones, filled with tears and trembling voices. But those are the moments that matter most. Evelyn stepped down from her bench and walked toward Elijah, ignoring the stunned faces around them. The boy hesitated for only a second before running into her arms, his small frame shaking as he sobbed against her chest. It wasn't just an embrace. It was the breaking of years of silence and longing. The courtroom faded away for them, leaving only a mother and son reconnecting after years apart. Isn't it incredible how love has a way of cutting through even the thickest fog of doubt and fear? The whispers in the room grew louder, but neither Evelyn nor Elijah noticed they were too busy finding each other again. And while this moment didn't erase the years they had lost, it marked the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. The courtroom may have quieted, but the journey for Judge Evelyn Harper and Elijah Daniels was only beginning. Life, as they both knew, doesn't wrap itself up neatly after a single moment of truth. Evelyn made the difficult but necessary decision to recuse herself from Elijah's case. Her role as a judge demanded impartiality, but her heart as a mother refused to step away. Isn't it fascinating how life forces us to balance duty and desire? She wasn't just walking away from the bench. She was stepping into something far more personal and profound, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. And so, she began meeting with social workers, foster parents, and attorneys, determined to ensure Elijah's well-being while also forging a connection with the boy who had turned her world upside down. For Elijah, the revelation brought a mix of relief and uncertainty. He finally had answers to questions that had haunted him for years, but now came the harder part: figuring out what those answers meant for his future. His foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Daniels, were kind people who had provided him with stability he'd never known before. Yet, there was a part of him that yearned for something deeper, a bond that only Evelyn could offer. Isn't it true that belonging isn't just about where you live, but about who you're connected to? Together, they began navigating this uncharted territory, learning each other's quirks and stories like two puzzle pieces trying to fit together after years apart. It wasn't easy, healing never is, but it was worth every awkward conversation and every tear shed. Their path forward was filled with challenges. Legal hurdles loomed large. Emotional scars ran deep. But in between the court hearings and therapy sessions, there were moments of joy, small victories that reminded them why they were fighting so hard. Evelyn found herself laughing at Elijah's quick wit, while he discovered her softer side beneath the stern exterior she wore in court. Isn't it amazing how love has a way of softening even the hardest edges? Together, they began rewriting their story, one day at a time. And though the road ahead was long and winding, they knew they weren't walking it alone anymore. They had each other, and sometimes that's all you need to start again. Life has a way of weaving the unexpected into our carefully planned narratives, doesn't it? Elijah and Judge Harper's story reminds us that the past, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of resurfacing when we least expect it. It's a tale of courage, the kind it takes to confront truths that scare us, to seek answers even when they might hurt, and to open doors we thought were closed forever. Think about it. How many times have we avoided looking back, afraid of what we might find? Yet, as this story shows, facing those shadows can lead to the kind of light we didn't know we needed. Their journey wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about healing. Judge Harper had spent years building a life of order and control, only to realize that true strength lies in vulnerability. Elijah, on the other hand, showed us the power of persistence and belief in something bigger than himself. Together, they teach us that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, effort, and the willingness to rebuild even when the pieces feel scattered beyond repair. Isn't that what life is all about? Picking up the fragments and daring to hope for something whole again? Now, let me ask you, what truths are you avoiding? What relationships in your life need healing? It's never too late to take the first step toward reconciliation or to seek answers to questions that linger in your heart. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so we can continue exploring stories that inspire and challenge us to grow.